back with story time. Light of the Infinite, The Exodus of Darkness is my second book. So we're in the chapter Clear Eyes, Full Hearts Can't Lose for the Torah portion of Exile. So many of us feel disconnected a lot of the time. This is exile, so it's the state of disconnection. Redemption is the rectification of that state and the reconnection. And many of us spin stories in our heads, filling in the blanks of desolation that often feel like desperation, because it's chiyut, this feeling of life and connection that we all crave, which sustains us. And of course, I'm no exception. Stories spin in my head when I feel uncertain, before I'm able to see things clearly. And anxiety is the feeling we experience when emunah, which is faith, and bitachon, which is trust, become distant and feel maybe unattainable. For interpersonal relationships, there's the solution to lessen the anxiety, which is communication, and that can deconstruct these stories that we're building in our heads, which are a mix of emotion, judgment, projection, and worry. But in some circumstances, when we can't speak to the other person, or perhaps doing so wouldn't offer much solace, we need to tap into ourselves, into our own energy, and even more so to the source, to Hashem, to God. Bitachon, trust, is the act of remembering that everything comes from ultimate good, and the entire world is held in this divine embrace. It's easy to say it or write it, but truly everything is ultimately for the good. And even when it doesn't appear that way, we have to trust the process and the path toward a perfected state that we can align with at any point. Just as Hashem, God, sustains and recreates the world at every moment, we too are creating our own reality and our own journeys from moment to moment. And if we are going in the wrong direction, we could turn it all away at that exact moment. It may take a while to feel aligned again, but we can be sure of a path, of being on this path toward alignment. Looking ahead in the right direction will allow some calm in the feeling of the storm. Tapping into emunah, faith, that it will all be all right, which is bringing in that feeling of rightness that much sooner. If we are able to sustain and create our own happiness and ensure a home base within ourselves, then we can stop looking toward others to fulfill the feeling that only we are able to give ourselves. The foundation of fulfillment and happiness must be in our own relationship to ourselves, for there to be healthy relationships with others. And we're often looking at everybody else for the answers that we could find within ourselves, or not even just the answers, but the love and all these other things. We have to find that foundation, perfect our vessel, our keli, to be able to bring that to others, but to sustain it for ourselves. This allows our default setting to be peaceful, joyful, and secure, rather than despondent, lacking, insecure when things with another person might feel misaligned. And I've had to work through this a lot. Like I've had, like all of us, these relationships that maybe were toxic, or somebody's bringing in this element that kind of just gets to us and can throw us off balance and can ruin our day, right? But we're actually giving them this power. And it's because we're so dependent on maybe their approval or their love or whatever it is. But the idea is that we could tap into that approval from ourselves, that love from ourselves, that feeling of alignment and goodness, and that we are enough, and that all of these things will ultimately be good, and we have that within ourselves, then we won't be so thrown off with the other person. We'll realize they're going through what they're going through, and it's not even about me, so it doesn't have to wreck me. And then we're in a healthier state with ourselves and with our interactions with others. Ben Zoma asks in Pirkei Avot, who is rich? He who rejoices in his lot. As it is said, you shall enjoy the fruits of your labor, you shall be happy, and you shall prosper. A feeling of richness and happiness comes from focusing on the positives and celebrating the moment. A feeling of sadness and poverty comes when we focus, and when the focus shifts to the opposite perspective. And validation of such feelings is focused outward. Dr. David Hawkins, a lot of people have read his book, it's called Letting Go, and he articulates this beautifully. He says, out of the recognition of who we really are comes the desire to seek that which is uplifting. Out of it arises a new meaning and context for life, when that inner emptiness due to lack of self-worth is replaced by true self-love, self-respect, and esteem. We no longer have to seek it in the world, for that source of happiness is within ourselves. It dawns on us that it cannot be supplied by the world anyway. No amount of riches can compensate for an inner feeling of poverty. I'm going to say that one more time. No amount of riches can compensate for an inner feeling of poverty. We all know of the many multimillionaires who try to compensate for their inner sense of hollowness and lack of inner worth. Once we have contacted this inner self, this inner greatness, this inner completion, contentment, and true sense of happiness, we have transcended the world. The world is now a place to enjoy, and we are no longer run by it. Healthily navigating the ascents and descents of life is the reality of life in exile. So this pasuk, we're going to read a pasuk, which is a verse from this Torah portion by Exile, which is sort of all of the things we're talking about right now, and this chapter that I wrote in my second book, The Exodus of Darkness. So this chapter, as I mentioned, is called Clear Eyes, Full Hearts Can't Lose. So take from among yourselves an offering to Hashem, to God. Whoever is generous of heart shall bring gold, silver, or copper as a contribution to Hashem. So I always loved this, and it's always been in my mind as we're moving through different psukim and different teachings, that it's whoever is generous of heart. So these sacrifices, it's basically a sacrifice of the heart, but it's also this movement of the heart and an inspiration to bring this goodness or this sacrifice toward Hashem, which is something that we're going through, and God willing, going through all the time, of how do we connect and see the good, and how do we bring that good for ourselves and for those around us. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov teaches that at the time of the revelation at Sinai, Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, reached awesome levels of prophecy, seeing Hashem face to face. This raises the question, how did they then go on to build the golden calf? Rabbeinu, which is Rabbi Nachman, teaches that when we are ready to ascend to a higher level, the klipot, the outer coverings or shells which conceal the godly light within all of creation, are aroused to attempt to prevent us from rising to greater spiritual heights. So it's this idea when you're trying to reach your goal and then all of these obstructions and all these things happen, the idea is instead of giving up hope, you have to push through, because that's like the final test before you reach that next level. It's showing how badly you want it and how much emunah, how much faith you have in knowing that it actually is for you and you need to push toward it. So it's kind of earning it in that sense. But when we conquer the klipot, we ascend to the next level. This happens again at each subsequent level. These klipot are the powers and the parts that work against us. Rabbeinu is teaching us that to subdue these klipot, we must give tzedakah, charity, which represents an action outward of giving, of focusing on the other. The act of tzedakah sweetens judgment, mamtika dinim, the judgments we have toward ourselves and those from our source. Rab Natan, who's his foremost student, and Rabbeinu said, if it weren't for Rab Natan, none of his writings and teachings would be in this world, and now they're to a greater level than ever in the last hundreds of years. So Rab Natan adds that when we don't subdue the klipot at each level, they can overpower us and push us into descent. This is what happens to the Jewish people, which caused them to choose to construct the golden calf. The rectification of this was the building of the Mishkan, which was done through these good points and through these people from whoever is generous of heart, as we read in the pasuk before, which represents giving charity from the heart. The Torah goes into an incredible amount of detail about the Mishkan, spending 13 chapters on describing every element of the tabernacle and how it should be constructed, which when you're looking at the verses that are devoted, I think maybe 32, to the creation in Breshit, in Genesis, it's just a few verses. But there's countless chapters, or verses for sure, and 13 chapters devoted to the Mishkan. Because one, the creation is Hashem, God, right, in the Torah, and it's covering that, and there's all of Kabbalah's in there. But when we're talking about the Torah being given to us, the Torah is for us. That's why so much is covered when it's talking about creating this Mishkan, which is this sacred sanctuary that we have to have within ourselves as well as the mashal that we're reading about and constructing in real life at that time. To put this into perspective, only 3 chapters are devoted to the revelation of Mount Sinai, and only 1 chapter to the creation of the universe, as we spoke about. It's written in the Zohar that the language used to describe the building of the Mishkan in Exodus is identical to the language that describes how Hashem created the universe in Breshit, in Genesis. Rabbi Shneir Zalman writes in the Tanya, the Baal Tanya, the Mishkan is the purpose of God's creation and of the creation of all the worlds, higher and lower, there may be for God a dwelling in the lower realms, which is actually us, our being. There is something essential to Hashem's purpose for the Jewish people in this structure. In the storyline of the Torah, the description of the Mishkan and its construction on Parshat, the Torah portion of Truma, Tetzaveh, Ve'akel, and Pikudei, bookend the sin of the golden calf and God's ultimate forgiveness of Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, the Israelites. This structure, a movable temple, becomes a sign of God's renewed closeness between himself and the Israelites. Rambam Maimonides explains that this dwelling for God is a place where man serves God, a house for God that is designed for the offering of sacrifices. Ramban Nachmanides describes the Mishkan as a place where God chooses to reveal himself to man. The main object, and this is a quote, of the sanctuary is to serve as the resting place of the divine presence. This is realized in the ark, as God says to Moses, I will commune with you there, speaking to you from above. The kaporet, the ark's cover. This is why the Torah begins its description of the Mishkan with the ark and the kaporet. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, the seventh of the Hasidic masters of Lubavitch, of Chabad, that's all over the world, teaches that within these 4 chapters we're currently reading, we find in order sequence of events leading up to the flow of divine inspiration to Israel. Truma and Tetzaveh cover the fashioning of the Mishkan, its vessels, the priestly garb, which the Rebbe says is the Atoret de Le'ela, which is this excitation from above. This is followed by the Itaruta or Itarut de Latata, which is the excitation from below, which occurs in these chapters, Parashah, the Torah portions, Vayakel, which we're reading this Shabbat, where the commands are channeled through Moshe, through Moses to Israel, and executed by them. In the final chapter of the sequence, the supreme emanation of the divine light from heaven to earth begins to flow. Hashem's glory filled the Mishkan. The Rebbe also points out something curious in the Torah portion of Truma, where it's written, and they shall make me a holy place, so I may dwell within them. V'shachanti b'tocham. Grammatically, the text should have said v'shachanti b'tocho, which is singular. I will dwell within the Mishkan. According to the Shla, this indicates that the addition to building the physical Mishkan, Hashem wants every Jew to make themselves and their home a holy place so that the divine can dwell among every Jew. We are each tasked with building our personal temple from the inside out. The more we work on building and revealing that holiness within ourselves and each other, the more Hashem, God's presence, is fully revealed in the world, and the closer we get to the third and final temple and redemption. It's a fundamental lesson. Think globally, act locally. Much of Judaism and its rituals center around the time of Shabbat. Rosh Chodesh, the new moon, the festivals, the sabbatical, the Jubilee year, and of course, designated times for prayer. It seems odd to have so much devoted to constructing a place and space for Hashem, the light of the infinite, a being not bound by space or time. Both Ramban and Rambam, which we quoted earlier, define the concept of a physical place that serves as a dwelling for God. They don't explain exactly how an infinite God dwells in an infinite space. I don't remember who was this quote. It might have been the Maggid of Mezerich, but I remember after he read Tanya from the Alter Rebbe, of Shneir Zalman of Liadi that we were quoting before, he said, it's a wonder how you could pack such an infinite big God into such a small book. And Tanya, when it's translated and expounded upon, it's massive, but it is this small thing, and it's like all of the secrets of the universe are in it. It is incredible. Avram Joshua Heschel points out that one of the most distinctive words in the Torah is kadosh, meaning holy. The word first appears in the Torah not in connection with a mountain or an altar, but in describing time. And God blessed the seventh day and made it kadosh, holy. It's no coincidence that the commandment of the Shabbat, Sabbath, is also in this and in the last chapter's Parashah, Torah portion. After Israel grew impatient waiting for Moshe to come down from Sinai and erected a golden calf, Hashem chose to build a relationship with them in time and space in the Mishkan, this sacred sanctuary that we're talking about, making the mundane into the holy, the physical into the spiritual. The word kadosh actually means to set apart. This word holy in Hebrew means to set apart, separation. When we designate something as holy and have a specific space for it, we are setting it above the rest. We are giving it the honor benefiting its special status. Jumping back into the verse that caught my eye this week that we were talking about, take from among you an offering for Hashem. Whoever is generous of heart shall bring the offering of Hashem to contribute to building the Mishkan. I love that it's written, whoever is generous of heart, which seems contradictory to the first part, which is more of a straightforward obligation. Ramban explains the second half of the verse as God's offering to the Jewish people in return for their offering they make to him. Whoever is generous shall bring the offering from Hashem, meaning God sheds light upon Israel in returning for their generosity. Rabbi Simcha Zissel of Kelm stresses that in offering one's donation, one must offer one's heart. In Judaism, heart and action are intertwined. So every wise-hearted man among you shall come and do, creating excitation from below. Through generosity drawn from above, it creates this reciprocal relationship between Hashem, God, and man. And this is how Hashem's glory filled the Mishkan. King David sings, Ani lidodi v'ledodi li. I am my beloved and my beloved is mine. The mystical interpretation of I am my beloved is an arousal from below. The Jewish people draw closer to Hashem, while v'dodi li, my beloved is mine, is an arousal from above. To merit this revelation, each person must first awaken our love and fear. This is arousal from below, and it's our spiritual task manifested through our offering and the meticulous way in which we build the Mishkan, our inner temples. The idea also plays out in Hashkacha, which is divine providence. The Hashkacha Prati, God's direct personal supervision. This is when one sees God's ongoing active participation in one's life. The arousal from above. This is when a person sees, as Ramban explains, Hashem choosing to reveal himself. So it's this idea that that's sort of the gift. The arousal from below is what we're doing, the itaruta de latata, and then that brings on the arousal from above, itaruta de le'ela. So we're getting this, we're peeling back some of the concealment to have more revelation, to be able to see God's hand in everything, which is this hashkacha prati, this divine providence that guides us in life, but that we often don't really see in any sort of revealed state. What each person does with that is up to them. But when a person chooses to receive that revelation and offers it back up in generosity, then we fully understand what the Rambam and the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, explained earlier in relation to the dwelling for God. Man serves Hashem and creates a dwelling for his revelation within himself. We need to build and strengthen our mishkans, our inner sacred sanctuaries, our own houses. As it's written, the wisdom of women builds her house. King Solomon in Kohelet writes, 1 man among 1,000 have I found, but a woman among all those I have not found. Rabbeinu Bachya comments that Solomon was referring to the golden calf, and that among all those who sinned, there was not one woman. Yet women played a major role in contributing to and helping to build the Mishkan. Even though they had no sin to atone for, they didn't have the tikkun, they didn't have the rectification that was upon them to actually do, to rectify. Chazal, our sages, state, Hashem gave women greater understanding, binah, than he gave men. This is seen in their righteousness in being first to contribute to the Mishkan, despite their not needing to atone for the golden calf. Solomon states in Mishlei, the wisdom of women builds her house. The Mishkan is the home that we are tasked to build as a dwelling place for the revelation of the concealed. It may be that we can all learn from women how to build a temple of generosity within and around us. In Tehillim, in Psalms, it says, how great is your good stored up for those who fear you. The sages interpret this to mean that Hashem gives us the greatest good that we can possibly accept. As we went over previously, one must be a vessel for this goodness. My project, Don't Block Your Blessings, was inspired by the Tzemach Tzedek's teaching of becoming a vessel for blessings, which was expounded on by the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The Tzemach Tzedek would say, tracht good, v'zayin good, which is Yiddish for think good and it will be good. And there's countless books on this, modern books in the self-help and wellness space now all about this. Literally, the act of believing in the blessing is the vessel for the blessing. Getting your mind, body, and spirit into the mode of preparing for and accepting the blessing and living with complete faith in its success is the means by which you can actually gain that blessing. The converse is also true, making it that much more important to focus on the good. Tehillim also says, I have no good but you. In the Talmud, Rabbi Acha interprets this to mean, no true good exists in this world except that of God himself. This is the true blessing. The revealed good, the arousal from above, the little bits of revelation of concealment of the light of the infinite. The mystical essence and the root of the word truma, donation, means to lift up, liromem, to elevate. Through these parshiyot, we follow all the ways in which the Israelites can offer their donations and their contributions to construct a dwelling place for the divine. And it's those exactly in those ways that the Israelite souls went from the sin of the golden calf, and the verse, go descend, for your people have become corrupt, to returning to their holy origins. Whoever is generous of heart shall bring the offering of Hashem. This is the potential of the supreme emanation of the divine light that every person can tap into, that emanates from heaven to earth and from earth to heaven. So this is in my Light of the Infinite book series. This is the second book that we're in right now, The Exodus of Darkness. You can pick it up on Amazon or wherever you like, Barnes & Noble, Target. And see you guys soon. Shabbat Shalom. Love you all. Redemption.